I believe that the museum will help educate the rest of the world that the Holocaust was something that happened, it was in the past, and that the future to brighten educationally, culturally, socially, intellectually, professionally, what the Jewish people, particularly of Poland, brought to the rest of the Jewish world. Having been to Poland before Perestroika and seeing the depth of despair that was in Poland, because when you used to come to Poland, all you would do is go to the concentration camps and see and learn all about death and the Holocaust. And what the museum does, and for me personally, what this does is perpetuate the feeling that the 1,000 years of history of the Jewish people that began in Poland will be able to continue and show the rest of the world that the Holocaust wasn't the end of everything, but the beginning. Well, in the Bay Area and in Israel, Koret Foundation has concentrated on Jewish peoplehood in a variety of ways, and I think that the museum is just an extension of this on a broader base. Sometimes in life there are things that you feel you need to do, and when you take a step back and really look at it, you realize that not just do you need to do it, but you feel like you want to do it. And together with Toby Philanthropies, the Koret Foundation is the single largest contributor to the museum. And for that, our board, me personally, and Tad are extremely proud and grateful.
Well, I think it wouldn't be over-dramatizing to say that it's essentially become my life's work here in the last decade or so. Its meaning, I think, it goes beyond its meaning to me. I think that this has great meaning to the Jewish people as a whole. The museum is different than any museum, I think, that exists in the world today. It's basically a chronicle of Jewish culture and history and philosophy that have served as the underpinnings of Western culture. So it's something that I think at this juncture is a gift to the Jewish people, which is basically reminding them, first of all, and the world as a whole, of what the Jewish contribution has been, which is basically the foundations of Judeo-Christian Western culture. It was a tremendous challenge. It took a huge amount of time, not only my own, but the people that believed in what we were doing here. Personally giving the money has never been that hard for me. I mean, to me, if you have enough to satisfy your normal human needs, and then anything else beyond that, is something that one can consider to do. I was born in Poland. I am, sort of a second-degree Holocaust survivor. I wasn't in a camp, but I was in Poland and lost most of my family about the time that the World War II broke out. I was one of the lucky ones because my mother and father were on a business trip to the United States in mid-1939, and I think that they had an opportunity to kind of see the handwriting on the wall, and they decided not to go back. So I joined them later on. I was living with my grandmother in Warsaw at the time, and they had an opportunity to bring me with a very dear friend to the United States. I think the next 30 years I spent trying to be just an ordinary American guy. I wanted to be like all my American friends. I wanted to be involved in sports. I wanted to have what I would consider to be a fairly normal American childhood. I was not particularly enthralled when my mother and father would speak either German or Polish to me in front of my friends. So I think there was a period there where I was really seeking to put my initial years behind me and integrate myself into the American culture, so to speak. So the big change in my life came as a result of two individuals that I became very close to. One of them was a gentleman by the name of Karl Bach, who was a German Jewish refugee, one of the really successful insurance people in the world, probably. He was a very strong believer in his heritage, in his Jewish heritage. And so that rubbed off on me. And then after that, I got into a very close relationship with Joe Corrett. And Joe was also very heavily oriented towards his heritage and his Jewishness. So between those two individuals, I started to go through a metamorphosis and became quite Jewish in terms of my soul and my heart and my belief system. The first thing I had to learn was how to overcome the sensitivities that existed among many American Jews towards Poland. I mean, I think the prevailing question that I had to respond to when I was, when people found out what I did and how I was doing is, why would you want to go to Poland? I mean, after all, they did so many terrible things to the Jews. And so the first challenge was really to overcome that and to answer the question. And the second challenge was really here, and that was to figure out exactly what it was that I was going to do, because I had made a decision that I wanted to help be involved in the revitalization of what was lost as a result of the Nazi murder of Jews in Poland and in Europe as a whole. Just to kind of regress a little bit, I think most people were very well aware that the Nazis murdered men, women, and children. I don't think people were as aware, or maybe not aware at all, that they also had a systematic murder of the Jewish culture. They bulldozed cemeteries, they burned synagogues, they burned books, they destroyed city records. The museum ultimately is an educational institution. And in fact, we're going to have a very large Toby Corrett Educational Center at the museum. And we're going to be attempting to export what we find in the knowledge about our past and our history and our philosophy and all of the elements of Judaism that we wrap into this term that we refer to as peoplehood is going to be essentially our lesson for our own co-religionists and for the people that are not Jewish. And you know, it's interesting, the best students that we have so far are the Poles. The amount of support that we've had from the Polish government, the interest that we've had from non-Jewish young Polish people has been incredibly gratifying. It certainly is true, it's a matter of record, that probably 70% of all American Jewish people have their roots in what I could call Greater Poland. Greater Poland being Poland as defined by its historical movement of its borders. For example, my father was born in Lwów, and it was Polish, and he's Polish. Lwów now is in the Ukraine, so now somebody that's born in Lwów would consider themselves to be Ukrainian. One of the things that has been really gratifying to me is the new generation, the new Poland, the new Jewish people here. Most of the Jewish people today in Poland are what we call the new Jews. They're the people that, because they were living now, as opposed to, say, 25 years ago, in a free democracy, they felt free to explore their roots, to talk about it, to explore it, to discuss it with family members, to, in effect, shine a light on it. And that has led to a lot of conversions of people to Judaism. I think I think the largest group of Jewish people in Poland right now are what we call the new Jews. The old Jews being the small handful of survivors and their progeny. That those Jews who have a Polish background are not as ready to talk about it as, for example, an Italian American might talk about their Italian roots, or an Irish American might talk about their Irish roots. There's all sorts of depth of meaning to that actually intersects with what we're trying to do here. It's perhaps a lack of self-confidence in one's ethnic background that has a lot of complex aspects to it, not the least of which is the Holocaust. So all of those deep-seated reluctance that exists among people to talk about their Polish roots is something that we are slowly overcoming as a result of this unearthing of this incredible culture that we've had here over 1,000 years. And I think that a lot of American Jews have not been proud of their Polish culture for a lot of reasons. I mean, certainly there were intermittent periods of anti-Semitism in Poland. That's talked about a lot. There were periods, long periods of very warm and cordial relationships between the Poles and the government and the Jews. We don't talk about that as much. Obviously, there was some reason why Poland became the home for over 3.5 million Jews. I mean, it was clearly a result that, for the most part, their circumstances here were positive. We're also trying to stress that part of it. I'm immensely satisfied that what I thought could happen a decade ago, but wasn't quite sure, is in fact happening. So I guess all the components of that would be a definition of pride. Yeah, I mean, I think to get into one's senior years and to be involved with something that represents, at least from an intellectual perspective, the culmination of my life's work is very exciting and very satisfying and prideful.
My parents are two of the only survivors of their family from Poland and from this part of the world. And most of my family were killed in the Warsaw Ghetto or in Treblinka. They came from a small town about an hour and a half south of Warsaw, and was born about 6 weeks after my parents arrived in New York. My parents were among the last group of refugees who came through Ellis Island. And I always had a very, I would say, difficult set of feelings about Poland, because I grew up in a community of survivors. There were 800 Polish Jewish survivor families who ended up living in southern New Jersey. They came to New York, but they didn't know how to find their way in the country. They came with nothing, having lost everything and almost everyone. And they formed a community in southern New Jersey. They became chicken farmers in southern New Jersey. I often asked my father, why did you become a chicken farmer? In Poland, his family owned shoe manufacturing companies that sold all over Eastern Europe and in what's now the Ukraine. And he said, "Mit de hiner de darf nicht reden kein English," which means with chickens you don't have to speak English. So I grew up in a community of survivors, and we spoke Yiddish. In my family, we also spoke Russian until I was about 5 years old. And Poland seemed like a very difficult place. It was a place that we ran away from. That it was a burning building that we jumped out of. And I never thought that I would find my way back to Poland. But when I got here recently, I went to the town where my family grew up. And they were there for generations. My great-grandfather was a rabbi there. My parents had their business there. Children, grandchildren, dozens of relatives, about 200 who died. The museum is an extraordinary accomplishment. And it reminds me of a Yiddish expression that I heard from my father, which is, "Gehennen und Geneiden können wir beide gefinnen auf der Welt," which means one can find both heaven and hell on this earth. In the same place where we all experienced and know about hell, we also now have a little bit of heaven. We have the worst of what humanity is capable of and the best of what humanity is capable of now in the same place. It's a healing place in many ways. Yesterday I spent the day in the hometown where my family comes from, and I also spent half the day in Treblinka, where for me it's the cemetery. I knew all my life that that's where my sister died, where my brother died. Actually, my brother was killed in the Warsaw Ghetto. My grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, friends. When I grew up, we had no grandparents to laugh with, no sisters and brothers to play with, no aunts and uncles and cousins or friends who were a part of our lives. And we felt that Poland was a cemetery. And in many ways it is. And we have to remember that part of it. But now, when you come to the museum, you see our history, you see beauty, you see inspiration. You also see the Polish people who are really interested in understanding the history of the Jewish population, the history of the Polish population, the interconnectedness of the populations, and who are filled with happiness and joy and pride. And so I think that the museum will really provide an extraordinary educational opportunity, and it's a very, as I said, a healing process. When you have a trauma, when you have trauma in an individual, and I'm a clinical psychologist, so I think oftentimes in terms of trauma, our tradition teaches us that it takes 40 to 50 years to be able to reflect on it, at least 40 to 50 years. And so it's now time we're able to reflect on what happened and to learn from it and to move into the next chapter and to find inspiration in Poland and not just tragedy. For me, being here is an important step in a healing process. Because of what happened with my family, my life has been filled with sadness because of all the loss. I grew up alone. We created our own family because all the survivor families had lost everyone. In my work, I work a lot with youth. I work a lot with families and with youth who are working to find their place in our story. And we never had a way to really teach the history of the Jewish people and our story before we had the museum. Now we have a way to talk about the accomplishments of the Jewish people in a way that inspires pride and a sense of place in history. And that's a great gift, and actually the next chapter in the story of Jewish civilization. The goal of the museum and the goal of my work as a member of the Jewish community and as somebody who runs, I think, some of the institutions in the Jewish community that work with the next generation is to remember those who've gone before, but to nurture the living and to prepare them for the future. I think the museum for us gives us the opportunity to develop worldwide programs for education, not just Holocaust education, but Jewish education as well. It is an anchor and a resource that I think will inspire educational opportunities throughout the world. I know in the Bay Area and in San Francisco, it's already had a profound impact. It's transforming how our institutions do business. It's becoming a focal point for Jewish education, for youth trips, for interfaith study. And we think that there's going to be a very robust worldwide study program linking the Holocaust Museum here with communities throughout the world. We're starting to send, for example, this summer, some of our educators to the museum here to study. They've formed an institute called the Poland Institute here, which will train educators. So I think it will elevate the capacity of the Jewish community worldwide to really educate and inspire and engage its youth. Because probably one of the greatest challenges now in the Jewish community, especially in the United States, is that being Jewish is a choice. And we need to find ways to engage and inspire our youth to understand their place in history and to find meaning and strength in their identity as Jews. And the museum makes that possible. So last summer we sent a group of young people here in a pilot project because we're hoping that the museum will link with communities throughout the world and provide an opportunity for young people to come here. So we sent from San Francisco, from the Jewish community of San Francisco, sponsored by the Holocaust Center of Jewish Family and Children's Services there, a group of 35 teenagers. And they were Muslims, they were Asians, African Americans, Jewish, Christians, all kinds of youth, all interested in understanding the Holocaust and understanding patterns of genocide. We thought that the further you get away from the Holocaust, there'll be less interest in understanding the Holocaust. In fact, what organizations throughout the world are reporting, Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., our Holocaust Center in San Francisco, is an explosive interest in understanding the Holocaust and in understanding patterns of genocide. The most powerful message for me is about resilience, about the capacity of human beings to be resilient, to experience trauma, and to treat each other in the ways in which we know that people treated each other during the Holocaust, but to then move forward and to use that experience to make them stronger and to be resilient.
I myself am not a European Jew. I'm a Baghdadi Jew, born in Bombay, India. So I was very fortunate, given my age, that I was born in a country of great tolerance and was able to survive. So I didn't know much about Polish Jewry or European Jewry. I went to Yeshiva College after being in the U.S. Air Force. And at Yeshiva, I studied about European Jewry, and then gradually learned more and more about Polish Jewry, mainly through TAD. And as I learned more about the history of Israel and more and more about the history of European Jewry, I realized how important Polish Jewry has been in the history of Judaism. A museum of this sort has its own purpose. There are many other things that we have done as a result of the Holocaust. One of the things that we have not done is really studied the people that were here for 1,000 years. And that is a very different study than looking at how they died. It's looking at how they lived, what they contributed, and how rich their contributions were relative to society in general, not just to Judaism. So I think that's what's unique about this museum, that it doesn't try to do all the conventional things one does about the Holocaust. And what we have done about the Holocaust, such as creating the State of Israel, creating legal doctrine to fight genocide, stuff like that. This museum looks at the civilization that was here in Poland, in general, Poland with a big P, so to speak. And I think it's just amazingly creative idea to do that, because as many times as I'm moved by the history of how people got killed here, and it's devastating and it's moving, etc., I think it's more a tribute to them, to how they lived here and what they did here and how important they were. They helped build science and industry in America. They helped create the State of Israel. In fact, they were the leading group in creating the State of Israel. Almost every prime minister in Israel since its creation was a Polish Jew. So it's just staggering how much they've contributed. You don't go to a Holocaust museum to feel pride. You go to a Holocaust museum to remember, to learn how horrible something was that you want to prevent. But you come to this museum to feel pride, to feel that this group of people managed from very small beginnings to help an entire culture.
I was born here in Warsaw in 1937, and we lived here for about 1 year, and then my father was transferred to Kraków, so we moved over there, and then we lived there until we left Poland at the end of 1948. We were not Jewish. We were, as far as I know, my mother and father were completely, Polish from way back in the many generations. But we certainly felt persecuted, like most of the Poles. I mean, the German master plan was not only to eliminate Jews from Europe by killing most of them, but also reduce the Poles to basically slaves and eliminate all of the intelligentsia, the people who could conceivably provide leadership in any battle against the Germans. So we, never felt safe. And I am sure that had my father remained in Poland, he would not be alive by the end of the war. Yeah. Well, look, I'm very, very impressed with the museum and with the plans for it, because whereas there are a lot of Holocaust museums, and I admire and certainly believe in their mission, but nevertheless, there really are, as far as I know, nothing of this nature anywhere in the world. And I've always been interested in history. I think this museum has a great potential both to promote tolerance of the Poles versus the Jews, but also of understanding of what the Jews contributed to the Polish history. And then a lot of sort of the richness, for example, of the Polish culture would not be there if it were not for the Jews, in Poland for 800 or 1,000 years. So, and that is not known very well today in Poland. And so I hope that this museum will enable the Poles to learn about this mutual heritage that the non-Jewish Poles and Jewish Poles really have together. And I really think that this museum will be one of the top attractions, if not the top attraction, in Warsaw for quite some time. So I am quite sure that especially American Jews, as opposed to other Americans of other ethnic background, will really flock, here and be very impressed with it, will tell their friends, and it will become quite famous in the United States.
Well, my parents were both survivors of the Lodz Ghetto, and in '44 they went to Auschwitz. They met after the war, first of all. So they went to Auschwitz in '44, and they both were sent to the work camps in Germany. And after the war, they met in Hanover, in Germany. And they married there. And then they came to the States in '48. And I was born in New York in 1950. So in 2004, we came here to Poland, and we went to Lodz to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the Lodz Ghetto liquidation. And both my parents were in the Lodz Ghetto. So we came here for that. And we spent 2 weeks traveling around Poland. So we went to Lodz, we went to a town called Lagów, where my mother's from, and we went to Krakow and Warsaw, and of course to Auschwitz. My parents were both in Auschwitz, and this picture is from the Auschwitz visit we had there. And then we went to Majdanek and all over Poland. It was a very important trip for us. Yeah, we're very proud of the museum. We're very proud of the whole thing happening. And for me, when I was here 9 years ago, I learned how in Poland there's Poles and there were Jews. A Jew from Poland was not called a Pole. And I think this museum will show Poland and maybe the rest of the world how the Jews were here for 1,000 years. And we were Polish. And Poles and were Catholics and Jews, not Poles and Jews. And this might clarify that situation. I think it will show how Poland was a center for learning and Jewish learning for the 1,000 years. It was the center of Ashkenazi Jews for all those years. And many people in the States just don't know that. They know about the Holocaust, and that's all we know. But if you look before the Holocaust, great things happened here. There were some ups and downs, pogroms and terrible things, but also some very good things. A lot of great learning. First of all, from the war to now, you're absolutely right. The communists took over. There was no learning about what happened in the Holocaust. Poland didn't realize really what happened here. And only after the communists left did the history come out. And now it's showing up in the museum to show everybody here what happened during the Holocaust and what happened before the Holocaust. The reason why I want to show the photograph, it shows our family. And this is my parents and my aunt and uncle. And they were supposed to die in the Holocaust. But with the resilience and the future that they held for themselves, they were very strong. They came to the United States and built a new family. So it shows the resilience of the Jewish people, that we were supposed to all disappear, but we didn't disappear. Some people questioned the location, that we took the picture at the train tracks in Auschwitz-Birkenau. and it was a holy place. We shouldn't have done that. But we were trying to show that we were there, and we lived and survived, and we now have a big family growing out of the horror of the Holocaust. It's wonderful that the museum is on the site of the Warsaw Ghetto, and the uprising happened 70 years ago. And to commemorate the 70th anniversary of that uprising and the opening of the new museum at the same site is really, it's a wonderful thing. The people in the United States and the rest of the world should drop the stereotypes of Poland and come here and visit it and see what's going on here, see the museum, see the archives that happen in the different institutes around the country, and visit and see what a great place it is. There's a lot happening here.
The opening of the Museum in the History of Polish Jews has so much meaning for me personally and for my many friends and colleagues who've dedicated their lives to rebuilding Jewish life here in Poland since the 1989 fall of communism. One of the main important meanings of the museum's opening has to do with it opening on the anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. There's a very direct and deep, profound link with great meaning for Jewish people. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising happened on April 19th, 1943. At that year, it was actually the first day of Passover, a very important liberation holiday for the Jewish people, as we know. The ghetto fighters raised two flags over the ghetto walls. One was a banner of the Zionist movement, because of course the State of Israel wasn't born yet, and the other was the Polish national flag. It was the first time that either of these flags had been raised since the start of the war and Poland's defeat by the Nazis. So it's an incredibly historic moment. And it signaled a show of solidarity. The Polish Jews of the Warsaw Ghetto believed in themselves as Polish Jewry. It also was a sign of a defiant proclamation against the Nazis. It said, "We are here," in Yiddish, "Wir seien do," in Polish, "Jesteśmy." And those words actually became a verse that is part of a partisan song that the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising inspired by a Jew in the ghetto of Vilna. So "Wir seien do," we are here. And that was to say to the Nazis, you're not going to win, we're going to win, and we're going to fight, and we are going to survive, and we are going to come back and revive Polish Jewish life. The show of optimism in that is really remarkable. And to have the museum open on this anniversary, it's as if the future that the ghetto fighters saw back then, 70 years ago, that future is now. Wir seien do, we are here. There was also an artist in the ghetto, a woman named Gela Sextain. She painted even through the days of the ghetto. Where she found paint and pens and paper, I don't know. It's miraculous. Even more miraculous was that her husband buried 300 of her artworks in one of the Ringelblum milk cans. 300 pieces. It's the only artwork that survived the Warsaw Ghetto. And along with the artwork, there was a last will and testament that she wrote. It was titled, "What Can I Ask For? What Can I Demand?" Can you imagine? And what did she demand? She demanded, I want to give my artwork to the Jewish museum that will one day be here to celebrate pre-war Jewish life. I mean, these are the words that have inspired the opening of this museum, the creation of this museum. In my mind, these words are broadcast and inscribed in the entranceway to the museum. I think of them every time I look at pictures of the museum and prepare myself to enter it. I believe the museum will instill cultural pride and confidence. The people who have not yet identified openly as Jewish, but know they are, will begin to do so. That people who might have an inkling that they have Jewish roots will start to explore them. Because this museum is not about the Holocaust. It's not about old, shabby pre-war buildings or Stalinist tenements. It's this beautiful building. It's a museum of life. You know, it's filled with light. You feel so proud just to enter this space. There's a real sense of civic pride, of cultural pride, And that, I think, is what it gives people the courage to embrace their Jewish roots and identity. I think there's kind of an aha moment to the experience of the museum, especially coming through the core exhibition. And the aha moment will be, wow, we really were here. We weren't marginalized. We were central. The Jews were central to Polish culture and history. The Jews were central to European history. And Poland was the center of world Jewish history. And so much of what we call modern American Jewish society and modern Israeli society really has its roots here in Poland.
This is really a remarkable museum to be able to document almost 1,000 years of Jewish history and not have it disappear without a trace, which is probably what would have happened. And I think of the analogy of the Spanish Inquisition, that if after the expulsion in 1492 there had been a group of people who decided we need to document Jewish history here in Spain, the richness of what we would have been able to recover would be far greater. So this is doing a service. The Toby Foundation is really providing not only a remarkable gift, but a gift to the preservation of history. Polish community used to call this, in a play on words, Polinia, which in Hebrew would be "here God dwells," because they saw it as their Jerusalem. They saw it as a sacred land. And it was for them. It provided such richness to the Jewish experience. So to be able to provide that to, and young Poles today are very interested in the Jewish past, because this is a new generation. It's almost become in vogue for Polish citizens, young Polish citizens, to explore the Jewish experience here in Poland. Well, I find it interesting that with each interaction and intersection, whether it's the new museum or the Krakow Festival, that people start coming out of the woodwork and identifying almost a hair of a connection. Gee, I had a grandmother who was half Jewish. And so people are exploring Jewish roots. They are looking at what the religion means. There are those who have come back to it and have made comments like, I never really felt at home, and now I am home, and it's a wonderful experience. So I believe every Jew is important. We need to save everyone that we can, and it is happening here on the ground. I would like to see people come into the museum and have it evoke memories. Sometimes they're suppressed, sometimes they're very deep down, and remember a melody that they heard as a child, or some ritual that went on in a grandparent's home that makes them realize, I am connected, there's something there, and then an entire new world opens. This is an opportunity not only for Poles, but also for Jews, because the truth be told, the Polish experience is vanishing. You know, as those of us, I'm a third generation American from Polish descent on one side. As the generations go forward, there will be less and less memory of that. And this puts it in the forefront. This creates a deep connection to that heritage and makes them appreciate where they came from, and also to have this sense of pride in the Polish experience. This symbolizes a renaissance in Jewish life. There is a difference between physical presence and spiritual presence. We cannot bring back those who perished, but their spirit is here, and this museum documents that and elevates it and brings it in a powerful way to the minds of Jews and Poles alike.
Welcome back to our live coverage here at the site of the Warsaw Ghetto Remembrance on this very special 70th anniversary. And I'm very privileged to have with me several important, distinguished guests, first of which is the Chief Rabbi of Poland, Rabbi Michael Shudrick. Rabbi, thank you for joining me.
Hi, good morning.
What does this day, this event mean to you, mean to the Polish people?
Well, it means we have a chance to remember. It means that while not enough was done 70 years ago, very little was done to help the ghetto fighters, we can't change that. What we can change is to make sure that we remember it, and we remember it in a proper, in a deep way. And I've never seen Warsaw remember the ghetto uprising like I'm seeing today.
Clearly, there was such emotion in the air as we stand here on this hallowed ground, as you well know, where 500,000 Jews were huddled together in this 1.2 mile circumference area with very little. And to experience this feeling of remembrance, yet the poignancy of some hopefulness too, I imagine.
Yes. Well, it's this experience of tremendously mixed emotion, because on the one hand, it's tremendous sorrow, and it's almost a loss of hope. I mean, what happened here was, I mean, it's cliche to say, but there are no words. There are no words. That's what Simcha Rotem said, and that's what others have always said. We can't describe it. You know, the most horrible things. And yet, on the other hand, you know, there were people that helped back then. Władysław Bartoszewski was sitting not far from me with Żegota. But, you know, that was 70 years ago, and we have to remember. But then there's, how do we deal with memory today? What does Poland think about what happened? What part does that place take in the heart of Poland today? And, you know, we always spoke about the Jewish uprising of Warsaw of 1943, and then the Polish uprising, which the non-Jewish Poles had an uprising along with some of the very few Jews left in August of 44. It was always the Jewish uprising and the Polish uprising. And now, for the first time in the last 48 hours, I'm hearing this was the first Polish uprising. And for non-Jewish Poles to say, wait, you know, our great and it was a great uprising. They lost like 300,000 people in August of 44, civilians mostly. To say that, well, that was the second Warsaw uprising, is really saying that Jewish memory is becoming, again, part of Polish memory, and perhaps for the first time. That really what happened to the Jews here 70 years ago is really now becoming part also of the Polish national memory.
And it's also significant, of course, and incredibly memorable on this spring-like day in Warsaw. The rain held off, which was nice and symbolic, I think. To think that there were 3.5 million Jews living in Poland before the war, the largest Jewish community, and now how many do you suspect we have here?
Well, the story of today's Jewish community is there were 3.5 million exactly, 90% murdered by Germans and accomplices, still leaving after World War II 350,000, more or less, survivors, of which the vast majority leave Poland in the 25 years after World War II. If you want to feel safe saying, I am a Jew, it makes good sense to leave post-Holocaust, Soviet-occupied, communist Poland. And so Jews left, but not all the Jews left. And the ones who remained, many of them gave up their Jewish identity to the extent that they never told their children or grandchildren until 1989. And then after 50 years of hiding, there was the question, is it safe today for me to tell my children, grandchildren, friends, colleagues that I'm really Jewish? Since 1989, thousands and thousands of Poles have discovered they really have Jewish roots. We don't know how many Jews there are in Poland today, but I do know tomorrow there'll be more, because they keep coming out.
And that's hopeful news, and thank you, Rabbi, for being with us.
Thank you.
With me now, the former Polish ambassador to Israel on this very symbolic day, Matthew Kozlowski. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us here live on JLTV. What do you take away from this very historic ceremony today?
Well, that's historic because I think it's the last ceremony like that. I would say the even number where we still have among us those who are fighting. And, you know, the presence of Kazik was something really moving.
Meaning the ghetto fighter, one of the three who's still alive.
Yeah. You know, I knew Kazik very well when I was in Israel. I got very friendly with him, and I was initiating this monument at Prosta Street to commemorate his enormous achievement with taking these fighters out, because of his action we know about these fighters, otherwise all the others would perish.
And having been in Israel so often, your capacity as ambassador to Israel, what do you hope will come out of this when you see an experience like this today, bringing together various cultures?
Well, it is not the first ceremony. I witnessed this 10 years ago, the 65 ceremony, when Kazik got the officer's rank of Polish army. So that was also very symbolic. But we are in front of a very impressive building, as you see, museum.
Behind us, yes, the new museum, the history of the Jews.
Museum, and I think that this museum would be of enormous importance, because that will bring life the 1,000-year history of common history, Poles and Jews. So that will be a great lesson for Jews and for Poles.
Yes. And we have just shown our viewers a program where we were giving them a little bit of a virtual tour, if you will, talking about the new museum and what it will offer to visitors, providing a beautiful series of examples of what life was like for Polish Jews over the past 1,000 years, which was quite amazing.
And it is very important for Poles as well, because it will teach the Polish youngsters that our history is a history of many nations living together, and our culture came out from many sources, and the Jewish source was one of very important.
Thank you so much, Ambassador.
Thank
I wish
you.
we had more time to talk. There is so much to discuss.
Thank
Pleasure.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Or I should say,
Dziękuję.
dziękuję. Dziękuję.
Shalom.
The spokesperson for the museum, this beautiful museum we were just talking about, which is right behind me here, us here, Peter Koznovsky. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Kosobucki.
Kosobucki, forgive me.
No problem.
A pleasure to meet you, sir. You must be, torn today. It's a very exciting day, a poignant day, the 70th anniversary of the Ghetto Uprising. And yet here behind us, over my left shoulder, is this gorgeous new museum about the history of the Polish Jews, which is just opening. Tell me a little bit about it and why you're so excited.
Yes, we are so excited. It's a very exceptional day for the museum and for the community of Warsaw and of Poland, because these two elements, the monument and the museum, they remain in a close dialogue with each other. The museum is about Jewish death, Jewish suffering, about the ghetto, and museum is presenting the Jewish life throughout the 1,000-year period. So they are complementary to each other, completing the story of a Jewish presence in Poland.
And I would like to say to our audience that this is the first example of its kind of a private-public partnership in creating this $100 million or so dollar museum that took almost 20 years, as I recall, made possible, the largest private donor being Toby Philanthropies and the Koret Foundation out of San Francisco, the Polish government, am I correct, and also taxpayers?
Yeah, exactly. It's a combination of goodwill of many different people from all over the world, many different foundation institutions. So it's a center that links people and bridges people, and we are proud to be the place of this kind.
Well, it is a pleasure to have you. Well, thank you for being with us. I wish you great success. And live from Warsaw, thank you for joining us on JLTV.